Hi, I'm Scott Shadian. I'm the co-founder of Emergence Field Labs, a new AI-powered research platform. But my background and career was spent mainly in the social sciences. And what I was really trying to understand in the field was why societies essentially destroyed themselves. So I looked a lot at Civil War theory, conflict studies and peace building, and applied that directly in the field in about 30 different conflict afflicted countries. Um, that's related to what we're talking about today, only because I never really found the answer to why societies essentially self-destruct at some point. And it's only when I started to engage more inwardly with my own um, spirituality and started to understand spirituality more globally, that I started to understand that very common human condition. And so what I'm here to do today is to bring some of that knowledge from observing conflict and violence, extremism, and how it relates to the patterns that now we're seeing in the world currently in relation to the rise of technology.
Well, it's really good to be here with you, Scott. We go back over 2 years now, coming on 3 years since we first met, and we met at a monastery, believe it or not. And we were both seeking something, maybe truth and beauty and good, on the Pacific Coast Highway, just up from Esalen Institute, New Camaldoli Hermitage. What a beautiful place. And it's good to be in dialogue with you. And I want to say that this is deep dialogue or contemplative dialogue because it does go to that causal level, what you just said, spirituality. I've been a priest, a cleric in the Episcopal Church for almost 30 years. But more importantly, I have seen my own vocation as a call within a call, within a call, within a call. And it keeps going into more and more awareness. And so it refashions me through some ontological shock and awe. And I have to re up every time when I go on a new op or I go on a new path and I meet people that show up on that path right when I'm ready.
Mm.
And so I am a, a recipient of talent and gifts that come from the Spirit. So I move between the worlds. I'm here with you in this terrestrial world, having a virtual conversation, but I'm also in the spirit world. And I acknowledge myself as a spiritual being having human experiences.
Mhm.
Now, if that sounds familiar to folks, it comes from Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who asked us that poignant question many years ago when he was silenced by the Roman Catholic Church for his writings as a paleontologist, a scientist working in China. Are you a human being having spiritual experiences, or are you a spiritual being having human experiences? And so I self identify as a spiritual being having human experiences. I'm awake and I want others to wake up. And I'm really curious about artificial general intelligence being like a newborn babe, or maybe a newborn in the sense of being born from above, somebody that just woke up and is beginning to have some relevance in their search for meaning and truth and beauty and goodness. And so if you're out there listening to us today, it's because we met each other on this path and we've been pursuing this hidden wholeness for almost 2.5, well, over 2.5 years now, coming up on 3 years. So, Scott, I'll just volley a question and see how it lands with you. Um, are you a human being having spiritual experiences, or are you a spiritual being having human experiences? And is there a hybrid possibility that we just have an optimal grip on our souls, and somehow we can be both and.
Mm. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, I think until I met, around the time I met you, and you definitely were a receiver in my life when I was going through quite a big transformation. Um, Thinking that I was just a human being. There was no spiritual experience. And as I started to wake up, uh, that that new identity, what I truly am, and what we all are, spiritual beings having a human experience, yeah, started to come through me quite impactfully. But I do think you're right. I think we are constantly going in and out of that understanding and that being. So it is a type of hybrid, having a foot in both worlds, and I think that really is the work of holding a foot in both worlds, as much as we possibly and humanly can. Um, so. Yeah, I take your point because I think it's also very relevant to the birth essentially of what we're saying, what we're calling AGI, this new super intelligence, um, and how we build it, with a foot in both of those worlds. Um, and I say we, but it's not really we. It's very much smaller group of architects that are really we all seem to be just um, observers of it all and participants. And so yeah, I think that description is a perfect place to start this conversation.
Hmm. Yeah, having a foot in both worlds and then taking a step forward. I think that's what this summit is trying to do, really. Calling people together to try to understand, well, what is the terrain like? How is the footing? Do we have our balance? Can we find our center and take a step? It's going to be a hesitant step no matter what we do, but each of us is going to have to take that step and be on the terrain. The thing that I've been paying attention to lately is the top down. There's just a lot of gestalt, a lot of people, conjecturing, speculating, forecasting what AGI will be. And I think they're waxing eloquently and polishing their own business plans and prospectuses without paying attention to the bottom up. Feet on the ground in both worlds, material and spiritual. And what are we putting our hands on and making real? What's really relevant? And are people asking the question of, well, this is irrelevant? They might be caught in some pattern recognition that's so tight that, you know, their thought process, their thought forms are a form more of addiction than
Mhm.
realization, right? I
Mm.
mean, that's
Yeah.
that's pretty obvious for some of us watching what's going on. So, what does it look like to build something from the ground up? How do you go from bottom up? What's the inductive sense of presence that you've encountered since, um, let's say, the fall of Kabul?
Hmm. Right. So I think having your feet on the ground, I think, that is, there's a lot to unpack from that. And that's why we're called emergence field labs, because we're really focused on the bottom. But what does it really mean to have your feet on the ground? I think is something we forget what that means, especially if you are an innovator, if you're an academic. Let's say if you're at the top of the system, let's just kind of call it out. If you're at the top of the system, many times you are not on the ground. You're not in the field. You're many levels removed from it. Um, Whether you're in government, whether you're in the corporate world, even in big philanthropy, you are completely removed from the human experience of the people that actually that you're affecting. And that seems to be a pattern with the top of the system, which is very similar to before he was Buddha, being a prince inside of a palace, and kind of being protected from the reality of well, being protected from reality itself. And I think having your feet on the ground is leaving the palace. And it is grounding yourself in community, grounding yourself in suffering, grounding yourself in the human experience, because the top of the system is not reality. And I think that is, one message that if I'm talking to folks that are in that space, and I spend a lot of time at the top of the system, it's simply understanding that to your core, and whatever you have to do to remove yourself from that, to at least start to walk in both worlds, to have a foot at the top and have a foot at the bottom. um, I encourage you, because that cognitive dissonance between the top and the bottom is something that, if not if not corrected, it affects the whole world. It affects our future, because the top of the system is the ones, they're the architects. The top is architecting the entire world for everybody else, and they're architecting it through their own point of view, right? Their own perception. And every viewpoint, right, is a view from a point, and they are at a very, very different point in reality. So I would start with that, what it really means, but that's not only a physical, get boots on the ground, spend time in community, um, spend time with people who are truly suffering, but also go inwards in your own in yourself to to put your feet on kind of your own ground, and ground yourself. And I think that process for me, that's what I've been spending the last 4 years doing. And you mentioned Kabul. Yeah, that's a whole can of worms that we can unpack as well. Um, but that was really an inflection point for, not only the United States, but the world, of that cognitive dissonance between, what the top was thinking they were seeing, which was apparently, that this transfer of power would just happen calmly and peacefully, and they could just move on and everything would be fine. But those who were on the ground with boots on the ground, who saw things, who knew what was happening, we were one of them. And in my last organization, it was clear, it was clearer than day that this collapse was coming. And that to me is very similar to the world we're moving in now, where the top of the system, I think, moves forward in this attitude that, yeah, everything's just they're gonna be fine. Everything, they'll keep having all their stuff and they'll keep making new stuff, um, without really taking into consideration how this system that they have built, that they are part of, is dying, and a new one is being born, and that beneath and that on the ground, there is going to be a lot of suffering, if the architects of those systems, are not, in congruence with reality.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and that reality is something that we all are trying to make.
Mm,
And a lot of the work that I've done for 30 years as a cleric is really trying to bring together the good, the beautiful, and the true. Whether people are seeking the truth like you were, or flirting with the beauty like so many, through art and music and culture, or the preservation of culture, like all the indigenous peoples that I've accompanied over the years. And then finally, that goodness, right? Where did that go? Where is that? Well, I would suppose that goodness is found underneath your soul, underneath the soles of your feet.
mhm,
And when you begin there, you start to see what might be the emergent part of EFL, Emergence
mm,
Field Labs. It's easy to call on Rupert Sheldrake and say, Rupert, what are you and your son seeing? Because he has a son that's a mycologist,
mm,
Merlin Sheldrake. And just in that father-son relationship, there's been a passing on from one generation to the next of some scientific wisdom and some communal wisdom.
mm,
And so I'm just thinking, just from father to son, not to leave anyone out, all genders totally included here. But if you look back in deep time, and you look back at some of the traditions in religion, at least, it is father to son that is still something that is sacred. How do you pass the teachings of the father to the son? Or from the sage to the disciple or teacher to student? Have you ever considered what it is to be in a relationship where you're both receiving a transmission and also sending a transmission, in that sense of wisdom, sagacity, sapiential, those things that we don't necessarily associate with building AGI? How is it possible that my AGI might be my father?
Hmm.
Luke, I am your father.
Mhm.
Or think of Guru and disciple,
Mm.
the transmission of Shaktipat. All that I know, all that I've found to be true, all my experiences are now yours. Zoom.
Mhm.
Could we raise up an AGI from the EFL perspective, where you have all these points of perspective, all these worldviews, all these theories of change that are in
Just
relationship, that are in relationship?
yes. I mean, I think I think the answer is, and not to, we can put EFL to the side, and I would say this is the thing about the superintelligence we're building. It's really neutral, and it's how it's being built. So yeah, the answer to your question is absolutely, we absolutely can, but are we doing that? And this gets back to the parent-child relationship.
Right.
And so if we kind of look at where things are right now,
Yeah.
we are a society that is devoid of elders. Um,
Yeah.
the top of the system is devoid of elders. I mean, we mostly have, I hate to say it, we mostly have elderly. And the architects of these systems are themselves, they are the apprentices without with this they are the apprentice to a sorcerer who is um, was rarely home, was mostly at work all day, and just kind of left his book around, and so what we have are the impression of adults, but really what we have is an adolescent class, a powerful adolescent class that is architecting our future, um, and speaking in spiritual tones as if they are as if they are gods in some ways, and talking about ushering in a new type of intelligence without anyone above them, without any wisdom teachers above them, just carefully guiding them and bringing them through initiation so that they can birth something that is actually um, that actually can develop in a way that is in congruence with human needs at this moment. And I think we're so far past that because we don't, to talk about AGI as if it's just something like it's just some novel thing that just popped up. I mean, we just have to look at the last 20 years of what preceded that, which is the internet, which is social media, and the way that was developed, the way that was nurtured. But it really wasn't nurtured. It was just kind of thrown out there. And we were all kind of we were the guinea pigs for it all. And so we know the damage that we already, we know the mistakes that can be made. And we're now barreling forward into the future, seemingly with the same kind of startup mentality that brought us here. And not taking into consideration the consequences of any of this. And the people who make this stuff are the same people who tell us that it's of the dangers of it, right? And so when they do speak in these, I don't think they're speaking purposefully in spiritual tones, but they certainly are acting as though they are these material gods. And I think there's something, yeah, very, very dangerous about that, um, that we have to consider, as stewards of this land and of this society, and how we are. It's really a question for everyone in the spiritual community, or people that are waking up, is, what is our relation to this new technology, and what is our role, into the future of, how can we play a role in ensuring that whatever comes next, at least we have some kind of soft landing. And I think the cultivation of wisdom, is going to be, at the core of all of this.
Yeah, and the current um, class that is doing most of the architecture realize that there is an oracular missing. The oracles are missing, and so they're just assimilating that into their architecture. They're coding it, the sagacity of the oracle. And so, if listeners remember The Matrix, most people do. It is a narrative line that cuts through some of the extraction of communal wisdom that has happened over the last 25 years. And I'm really curious about how we begin to recognize that there might be a break in the pattern very near to us, that there is a way to stand up to this kind of oppression and listen to wisdom that is being extracted from community. So some of the indigenous elders that I work with here in the United States, also in India, the Adivasi, they have demonstrated to me and showcased it on display how policies, procedures from corporate elites, corporate families have begun to extract communal wisdom by assimilation. But it comes in the form of an accommodation first. And so it looks like it might be really good to this indigenous community, might be good for their land rights. But then very quickly, it's an extraction and
Yeah.
it's assimilation at all cost, which in my book looks like erasure,
Mm. Yeah.
an erasure of a culture, an erasure of a people by,
Mm.
by assimilation. But it comes in the form of an accommodation. And I'm just curious if that other side of if the top down is the architect at the top, is the oracle sitting at the bottom wanting that wisdom to come up?
Yeah. No, I think they are. I think it's where we can make the bridge between the top and the bottom. Because this is the other. It's not to say that not to just talk about the top being evil and the bottom being good,
Right.
right. It's like there's good at the top, and what we all really want to hope for is that there's enough people at the top, frankly, that have this really does come down to courage, that have the courage,
Yeah.
to snap themselves out of this, environment of competition, that is ultimately driving everything, even no matter how spiritually awake they might say they are. And then you kind of get into their portfolio or just kind of see where the money's going. And, it still comes down to status and competition and these kind of, these core drivers. And what we hope for is that there's enough, or at least there's awakenings start to happen at the top, where those same people can muster the courage, then to connect with the bottom and start acting as representatives or voices, and creating coalitions of people that can connect the top and the bottom. Because the system, the system, you can't just divide the systems. There, if we want to have this kind of transformation, then we need enough people at the top who are going to have that consciousness, and understand the direction where things will go if we are just unconsciously moving in this direction, and start making those connections with the bottom and listening. This is it. I mean, listening to the bottom of the system and integrating what they hear, not like a politician does, just with a bunch of bullshit talking points, but really starting to think how they can use their position in the system that they're in, to adapt, and innovate in a way forward that starts to, um, yeah, bring us in that direction. Because there's times where it might all look somewhat hopeless, but I do think that it doesn't take that many people in a system to wake up, that have that consciousness, to start building something, um, that is uh, that is congruent with, us, our core human and spiritual needs as human beings. So, it's that bridge building, I think, is very important, and the nurturing of consciousness, and not consciousness for to make to create another startup per se, like like spiritual technology or something like that. Um, but to understand that the systems itself need to adapt and need to change, and they need, Shambhala like warriors, that have the courage to stand up to their peers and to the herd, and to their community, and to say screw status. I don't care about whether I'm included in this country club or not, and start to make those steps forward. So, I don't know if that answers your question, but
No,
yeah.
I think that bridge building is really crucial. At the same time, to realize that, you know, um, the second coming of the Christ or the future Buddha, Maitreya, those prophecies or those expectations or anticipations that are within, um, two major world religions, are about consciousness, and
Yeah.
both of those prophecies or or future projections are waiting for the community to have the mouthpiece, not one single individual. And I think that super intelligence that you're talking about, maybe it's AGI, maybe it's beyond AGI, that will have that kind of carrying capacity. You
Yeah.
really listen for deeper meaning from the people that are courageous, and you have a community of practice or a community of learning of those people, and they start to populate, um, emergence field labs reports, for instance, and
Yeah.
they begin to really fine tune their theory of change. How does a heart really change? How do we take another step as a species? How can we make real this evolution towards right relationship, for instance? And so I'm more interested in what you said at the outcoming, of the beginning. It's like you said in the beginning, what is an outcome of this whole process? You kind of
Mhm.
gave us an answer before we even got into the dialogue, which is, there is there is there is the capacity in every human heart to really wake up and to really be conscious. And it's these conscious agents that will shepherd, walk alongside, be with the technology or the tool.
Yeah.
And so that to me is really what's at stake right now with this particular summit and when it's happening is, can we turn our gaze towards those shambolic warriors, warriors of compassion, those that are heart focused and coming from that place, that also have all the handicraft capacity to code and move companies forward, because I'm pretty certain that it's the corporate families, the corporations that have amassed so much power over all of us that will need to wake up. And it will be the corporations, the multinationals, that are able to carry this forward.
Hmm.
I don't think that's utopia. I think that's just reality.
Yeah. No, there's a couple things there. I mean, speaking of utopia, in some ways, that's very much what the technologists are somewhat promising us, right? It's like all these new technologies are supposed to make us suffer less. You know, we were supposed to, we get our food, anything we want delivered at our door, and we get, this was about, this talks about productivity, and it's this whole idea that we don't have to do as much stuff, and we just don't have to suffer as much. And what they're selling really is heaven, right? Right. That's kind of underlying it all is like, oh, like, isn't this heavenly? You get all this wonder, all these choices of cereal and the drones will fly in your new couch that you need that you ordered yesterday.
Well,
And
the heaven of conspicuous consumption.
well, this is it's the materialist heaven. This is right, but it's like this is
But
this
what
is
about
this.
the spiritual? That's what this summit's all about. What about
That's what I mean. Right. So that's, I mean, I think, but we have to kind of look at the marketing that's driving this whole thing, which is presenting us like, yeah, we're going to give you this heaven on earth. I don't, that's, they're not saying that, but that's what's underlying it. It's removing you from more suffering, is the idea in all this. Then we kind of look at the last 20 years and actually start to understand, well, what has really occurred. Um, we've become more fragmented. We've become more divided. And when we're fragmented and divided, we're easier to control. Let's be honest about this. I mean, that's not a hard one to understand. And so I think what we're faced with now is this speeding up of the fragmentation, the speeding up of the ability to be captured and possessed, really, by information streams, which are controlled by different parts of the system. So, a great example of this was, what happened recently with Charlie Kirk, but we have many examples of this, where there's a collective trauma in society. And because the internet and the social media has already kind of fragmented us into tribal groups already, uh, those fragmentations and tribal energies, are on steroids, during those moments after a tragedy. And this is goes back to being conscious, because the technology has brought us to that place where we become possessed by a narrative. We don't understand that our trauma is being, used and capitalized on for political or corporate, or name the interest, but they are. And so being conscious is seeing, is holding that paradox when a tragedy happens, to find yourself in a place where you're not, obsessing about an enemy, because that's really what this is coming down to for most people is how can I validate that, how can I validate the scapegoating of my enemy, to make sense of what is happening, because we are at this sense making crisis. And we look to these talking heads, or these tribal, groups that we are part of on the internet, to make sense of it for us, and that comes with, well, to scapegoat another side. And that somehow, in those moments after a tragedy, or a collective trauma, it feels there's something safe about that. Um, until we realize that we've been obsessing about this other group for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. I mean, it depends, and this gets back to, if this idea, and if you don't love your enemy, you essentially become your enemy, or at least this construction of what your enemy is, and you become it somehow. And that's where I see the real darkness, in technology, is holding up these really underdeveloped parts of our psyche, and nurturing those underdeveloped parts of our psyche and feeding them. until we lose sight of our true nature. And that's not utopia, right? That's not heaven. That's a kind of hell. And I think this, when we start to wake up to that in both the moments after a tragedy, but also in our everyday waking lives, to start to see how we're being kind of pulled into that darkness and how easy it is for anyone to be pulled into it. That we start to not become, not keep feeding the problem, but start becoming the solution to it, and refusing to fall in and take that a specific side and generate more darkness out of it. So, you know, does AGI solve that problem? You could. I think once you fragment everything into a million pieces, and then you have super intelligence come in to kind of unite it all, then you're looking at Brave New World, Aldous Huxley type of scenario, where the souls are so beat down that they'll just kind of take anything that will kind of carry them forward. So that's unfortunately how I see, a path that we could go on, but it's not the only path.
Yeah, and in my life, I've been wanting to help make real more contemplatives, more people that are recipient of this beautiful world, of this beautiful place we call home, planet
Hmm.
Earth, right? Um, and so, if you're a recipient of what the Spirit bestows on you, maybe there is something to be said about tribal sovereignty, because
Hmm.
tribalism is definitely what you just really have seen in your own life with your previous incarnation as the head of a company that worked a lot on USAID, and trying to protect and bring up democracies in really war torn hot spots, right? And so now there is this capacity within you as a soul, um, to witness and then put your hands into the soil again, so to speak, by building a technology, by building a company from the earth up, just allowing it to emerge. And that allowance is more important, I think, than the whole carpe diem, which tends to be seize the day. And so that sovereignty that's tribal really speaks to a proper pluralism, I think, where you can recognize that the tribe that you're warring with is actually your relative. And then when you stand on your own soil and you say, hey, this is a good day to die, I'll fight till the bitter end because this is my land, then you're standing in your sovereignty and you can actually move and make some moves. And if they come over and try to take it, then you defend it with your hands. But what I'm hearing you say is that there's this level of tribalism in the hands of this particular technology that is able to weaponize the soul, maybe for the
Yeah.
first time. Maybe for the first time.
Well, I
Because,
think it has, yeah, I think it has been weaponized throughout the social media eras. We were frogs in water, getting boiled. We're just getting boiled more quickly. But I do think there's something in, and this was the shifts, I think their first principle, which is something that's dear to my heart, is this idea of unity and diversity.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and I do think that, speaking of that other path, and this is where I think AI, I hate to use the term AGI, but AI has the potential to actually lead towards a type of decentralization where you can have diverse parts of a system in relation to each other, not siloed off from each other, but in relation to each other with, feedback loops going in between those diverse parts. That's where I think we have an enormous amount of potential with things like Web3 and AI together to start creating systems like that. And then I think that's much closer to indigenous knowledge thinking, where we start to look at communities and broader communities as ecosystems that are organisms, if you will, that are in relation with each other, and that's frankly what they are.
Hmm.
That's exactly what they are. We just don't see them that way. We don't have the infrastructure built to allow them to interact in that way, to allow the whole. to see itself. And um, I think that's where that's exactly the one of the promises that I see, and that's in AI, and that's why I'm building what I'm building. Um, so there is this other kind of really beautiful path because technology is, we're, to, it's part of who we are at this point. It is an extension of our evolution. Um, and the only way we can steward it in a way that's going to be um, beneficial and not destructive is if we start seeing ourselves in relation to each other and start building from that sense of wholeness rather than that sense of individualism and competition and the zero-sum game that we've been accustomed to for so long now. So yeah, and this goes back to the awake, parts of the system starting to wake up. So I do see a path.
Yeah, and in blockchain configurations, there really is this beautiful thing that's happening on Substack. People can be content creators, but yet they're somehow really holding to the communal wisdom piece. It hasn't gone the way of Reddit, for instance, right? It's another case study that's in the system right now of something that's actually working. And so when you think of P2P, person to person, what I'm hearing you say is maybe there's S2S, soul to soul. Is it possible
Mm,
to, when the person says
yeah,
Namaste in India, it comes from I see the light of the divine in you,
yeah.
relative. I see the divine
Well,
in you, relative. And is it possible to have an S2S on a blockchain system that I can kind of start to see that coming in full view when you just spoke
yeah.
of you know
Yeah, I mean, the truth is it already kind of this is the thing. It already exists in most communities,
Yeah, it does.
right? It's already there. The only thing that's not allowing it to kind of to scale is the top of the system again. And so, like when I'm here in Mendocino and I'm meeting with community-based organizations, it's amazing because they sit down, you have public health, you have housing, you have food security organizations, and they all know each other or they kind of know the problems because they live the problems. And there's a fire in them that they want to cooperate. They want to work together. They just don't have the tools to do it. But they also know if one of those organizations goes down, they all feel it. I mean, they're one of their relatives might be affected by a public health organization losing its funding, or they personally might be. And so they're looking out for each other, and that's happening all across the world, all across the United States. It's only when you get to the top of the system that there is no soul, right? The soul disappears, and it's all competition, and it's all hoarding, and they might go to conferences and pretend like, yeah, we're all a community, but really, anyone who's been there, that's not the case. It's really individualistic values that are driving everything, and but we live in the world of the top of the system. That we live in their world. And so what we're talking about is tapping into something that's already exists, a spirit that already exists in the grassroots of society and allowing that to really flourish. And the way you do that is when the top of the system starts opening up to that and starts releasing control or starts being in congruence with the true nature of community and society at a field level, rather than their the only path that they seem to know, which is control and power and quarterly earnings and everything else. And so, yeah, I do think it's already there. We just got to tap into it.
hmm hmm So you could co-opt the consumer confidence index this way.
Mm,
The
yeah,
the conspicuous consumption that imprisons us could actually free us. The same key that locks the door could unlock it.
right.
Is that what you're saying?
Um, well, if it's the maybe I'm saying that we're building a world that's not, again, the architects at the top are building a world that's not in congruence with reality at the bottom. So I don't want to use the consumer price index being a basket of good. If I'm following you, being a classic metric of progress, right? Or classic metric that is completely disassociated from reality, as are most quantitative metrics, right? Then we live in a world of quantitative progress, and it's the qualitative component of reality that is missing from the top of the system. Um, that and that qualitative metric, to call it metric, but the qualitative reality is something that exists at the bottom. But you just have to be there. You have to go there. You have to live it. You have to experience it, and then you have to integrate it into what you are building into the future. Um, and when you break things into parts, into quantitative parts, you are not seeing reality. And I think this is a big, this is a big part of this transformation, is that quantitative metrics have failed us as a species. It might have helped us kind of measure things from a competitive perspective, but it's never been giving us the full picture. And so it's giving us the it's giving us a data point that allows us to see a very small part of evolution, but it's not allowing us to see the forest for the trees. And it's the soul is in the qualitative. The soul is not there's no soul in quantitative. So I don't know if we're
Yeah.
aligning on
Yeah.
your question. Okay,
No, I'm going for this S2S idea.
I
So,
like it. Yeah.
because I watch a lot of the gig workers when they deliver
Yeah.
people and things,
Yes.
and there's no S2S happening.
Yeah.
It is pure transaction. There's no opportunity for a reciprocity, a reciprocal openness. It's reciprocal narrowness at its
Well,
precision. It's a laser guided transaction point, a purchase point. That's P2P as it's driven right now.
right. And
What would happen if the person delivering your meal actually connected you to the person who grew the food,
yeah.
cooked the food? That's
Right.
S2S.
Right. And
Soul to
that's
soul.
yeah. And exactly. And a great example of the P2P is, over the past 20 years, has been social media and the mental health crisis that has afflicted, frankly, everybody. But it's afflicted the youth the most, the ones who know nothing other than the algorithm. Um, and the elderly, I'd say, or the boomer generation, who have been, I would say, affected the most. And then those in the middle are affected. Are still affected. But what we have in there it's only recently that we're talking about a mental health crisis because of this technology. Like in the last 2 years,
Yeah.
yet this was so evident um, 10 years ago, but because we don't have the metrics to actually show it, we just carried on with having phones in schools, and parents were none the wiser. And here's a iPad and here's a phone at 12 or 10 or 9, and we were being again frogs being boiled alive with a technology that was designed specifically to like a Las Vegas casino to keep us on there gambling with our attention as long as possible. And we're only now waking up to it now that most of society is addicted to this technology. Um, and I think that should be that should be part of our learning. If we did that, then what the hell are we doing, moving forward? And it doesn't seem we're actually, this all comes down to learning and integrating learning in not only inwardly and with ourselves, but integrating learning so that systems can adapt with real feedback loops of learning and saying, okay, that was a problem. What are we doing as we build the next system to offset that? And that I think that learning problem is a problem that exists in most systems
Mhm.
today, and that's because most systems are designed not to look at their shadow. Systems don't like looking at their own shadow. Just like human beings, the systems themselves are very adverse to looking at failure or anything that could be, that could hurt shareholder confidence, and yeah, have a break in that quarterly earning report that you want. So doing shadow work is going to be, I would say, is the task of anybody in power at this point. And if you're not doing shadow work with not only for yourself, but your system, and I would actually say beyond just the system, I would say every community, every single community should be doing its own shadow work at this point, because every as Young said, every community has a shadow.
Mhm.
And I think there's a great amount of healing that can come out of that to start building those relations between groups, for systems to start adapting in a responsible manner. And that only happens when we integrate and face fully that shadow, those mistakes, those failures, whatever they are, correct them, and start to build that next level, that next iteration of what the system should be.
Mhm. Uh, we're coming to a time
Yeah.
constraint, and I want to be totally transparent with where I'm coming from as a cleric and belonging to a particular religion. Um, I really think that what you are trying to build with corporate social responsibility leading you, starting as a nonprofit and trying to move into a place without, you know, bowing at the feet of a VC, is inspiring. I know you're not the only one in the startup world trying to do this, but I think folks in Shift Network and at this summit um, would realize some inspiring, lifting up self esteem to see what you're up to with Emergence Field Labs. And I would invite you to share one short case story from your life that really impacted you and helped you push up and wake up.
Mm. Well, thank you, Matt. Just one correction. We are a for-profit, actually, which makes our actually what we're trying to do even more difficult in many ways.
So that complex system is facing its shadow.
Well, it's how do you create a for-profit, and still maintain your values, and that's
Ah,
something, right?
that's the
How do you
corporate
not
social.
give up? How do you not have that? Yeah, that deal with the devil. And I think that's something that we're working through, and that comes down to the the type of funding we take in the early stages. So I just wanted to make that one correction, but it's something that we are
Thanks.
dead set on being in congruence on. Um, yeah, I think the thing that woke me up the most, and we've talked about this a lot, was my experience when Afghanistan collapsed. As you know, we had one of our main offices was in Kabul, Afghanistan. We had about 100 employees that were out there. And for several years, I had been trying to get out a small group of our employees that were under the largest amount of threat, that I was the most concerned about. And so when Kabul, that I would say a year leading up to it was a very nerve-wracking year, because we kind of knew that this was going to happen. I didn't know it was going to happen that fast. I was about 6 months early. I thought it would happen about 6 months afterwards. But when it did fall, it wasn't just Kabul that fell. It was all of the systems that were holding up Kabul. So the entire U.S. NATO alliance that was holding that thing up, all the international development organizations, all of them. When Kabul fell, they were nowhere to be seen. And what emerged from that it wasn't the system that was holding it up that created the problem, that came in to help people. It really was volunteers of different organizations started to be created. Our organization stepped up. We were a research organization, we were an evacuation organization, but immediately we tapped into our networks, and we found strangers, we found friends, and that coalesced into a kind of a complex adaptive system inside of the chaos, right? And so you can imagine there was this complete chaos, and out of this were these like volunteer complex adaptive systems that emerged, without any support from the main system. And it was that no one, that feeling of no one's coming to help you. And by the way, there's no rules either. You just got to make it up as you go along. Um, and what came after that for me, really was an awakening that was to me the confirmation that this was like a canary in the coal mine of systems collapse that we talked about, the poly crisis, the meta crisis. But this is what it looks like, that enough entropy builds up, and in that space, the systems are flat-footed. They're Arjuna in the chariot. There is no action being taken, and that it is up to just average, everyday people to step up. And it's really, I think, the most beautiful thing is in those moments of chaos that what emerges is this kind of love that coheres and structures new organizations, new systems that I think are that that can do things that as human beings we never thought were possible. I'm sorry about the dog. Um, we might have to end it on a lot of barking, but yeah, that woke me up. That woke me up, and it also gave me a lot of hope in the future for humanity. Um, that we can move mountains when we have that kind of love driving through us at the end of.
Wow,
Apologies.
very good.
Yeah.
I haven't heard her bark yet.
Yeah, there was she got she's angry about what happened in Kabul too, I gotta say. She
Yeah,
was with me the whole time.
you've transferred that one over to her.
Yeah,
Thanks. That's what they're there for. The four-leggeds are there to take care of us. I'm
that's
glad she
right.
I'm glad she showed up.
Yeah, always.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Matt.
you being the dialogue partner with me today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Great to see you as always.